The real concept of vengeance is simply creating a world that comes in balance again. When justice is correct, when it is exactly aligned, then it appears as vengeance, and there's nothing wrong with it.
This is the Dilemmas on Screen, a Jewish perspective podcast, where we take ambiguous moral situations in fictional popular movies and TV shows and analyze them from a Torah lens. As a quick overview, Maximus Decimus Meridius is a loyal Roman general who leads the empire to victory in battle under Emperor Marcus Aurelius. The emperor, disillusioned with his corrupt son Commodus, chooses Maximus as his successor, but doesn't tell anyone about it, because Marcus Aurelius believes that he, Maximus, will restore Rome to a republic and return power to the Senate. When Commodus learns of this, he murders his own father, Marcus Aurelius, and seizes the throne. Maximus, suspecting the murder, refuses to pledge loyalty to Commodus. This prompts Commodus to order the execution of Maximus and Maximus's wife and son. Maximus escapes, but is too late to save his family, finding their bodies crucified and burned. Stricken with grief and rage, Maximus collapses and is captured by slave traders. He is sold to a gladiator trainer and becomes a powerful fighter in the arena. As Maximus's fame grows, he is brought to Rome to fight in the Colosseum, where he comes face-to-face with Commodus once again. Though Maximus initially fights to survive, his ultimate goal becomes revenge, to kill Commodus and avenge his family. He hides his identity at first, but eventually reveals himself, declaring, "And I will have my vengeance in this life or the next." As he gains public favor, Maximus becomes a political threat. Commodus tries to have him killed, but Maximus's legend only grows. In the climax of the movie, Commodus challenges Maximus to a rigged duel. Although wounded and dying, Maximus defeats Commodus, finally achieving his revenge. Now, here's some questions we have. How does the Torah generally view revenge? Generally speaking, forgetting the blood debt for now, someone's family is murdered, but just generally, what is the Torah perspective on revenge? That's question one. Question two, looking at our situation more closely, the revenge here has more to do with the blood debt. Commodus murdered Maximus's wife and son. Maximus is seeking revenge for his murdered family. This seems different than kind of taking revenge generally. It's not because someone, said something mean to you or didn't do you a favor. This is very personal and very serious as it can get. So does that change the Torah's perspective on taking revenge? And then question three. We often enjoy revenge stories because it's often seen as a quest for justice. What exactly is the relationship between justice and vengeance? Is there a relationship? And if so, how are they related? Or where do they differ? And then question four. We want Maximus to win. However, it's kind of hard to not pay attention to the number of corpses that start piling up because Maximus is seeking his revenge. Just as a simple observation, right when Maximus escapes, he has to kill a number of Roman guards who are ordered with his execution. We don't know their level of guilt and complicity in the murder of the emperor, but seemingly these are just people who are doing their job and executing a supposed traitor. So they weren't doing anything wrong, and Maximus has to kill them all. And then moreover, in the gladiator arena, Maximus has to kill people. And then finally, Maximus kills Commodus, the emperor of Rome, who, as far as we know, does not have a son, right? He has no children, and therefore there's no direct heir. When that thing tends to happen, there's often a civil war in which God only knows how many people are going to die. So, given all these things, how far do we allow revenge to take place? If the Torah permits revenge, how much collateral damage is permitted? Because it seems like there's a whole lot of damage that needs to occur in order to get Maximus where he wants to go. So, with all those questions asked, let's see what the Torah perspective is. I'm excited to welcome Rabbi Benzion Klatzko to this episode to answer our questions. Rabbi Klatzko is an ordained rabbi, a music producer, a published author, and a radio talk show host. Dubbed the Hollywood Rabbi, for years Rabbi Klatzko delivered a popular monthly class in Jewish thought to many of Hollywood's biggest stars. Rabbi Klatzko is one of the national directors for Jewish life on campus in North America and was named one of America's most inspiring rabbis by the Jewish Forward magazine in 2014. Rabbi Klatzko is also the founder of Shabbat.com, the world's largest Jewish social network, helping people find Shabbat, Jewish dating, and employment in over 120 countries. He can be reached at 212-742-2228 or 212-SHABBAT, or via email at rabbiklatzko@gmail.com. I will copy all of this information below, and please enjoy this episode. Thank you so much. Rabbi Klatzko, thank you so much for joining us on the show. So excited to have you.
Pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so let's get right into it. So Gladiator, it's a classic. And I heard Russell Crowe and Ridley Scott, the director, actually discussed how the premise of the movie is very simple. It's effectively a revenge story. And so I want to focus on that in terms of, we obviously feel for Maximus. We really don't like Commodus. You know, he's portrayed amazingly by Joaquin Phoenix, just a memorable villain. But morally, from the Jewish perspective, how do we see Maximus's journey in terms of, before we go into Maximus's specific situation where like his family was murdered, the idea of revenge? We can understand revenge, we relate to revenge, but how does Judaism view revenge generally?
So the Torah says, lo sikom lo sitar, which essentially says, don't take revenge. Don't take revenge. Don't be vengeful. And this sounds like a very, very difficult precept to listen to, especially that some cultures taking revenge is the bread and butter of how they of how they function. It actually is the gasoline in the engine that allows them to.
I'll actually just share like a funny, based on what you said, I'll share a funny story. When I was working like 15 years ago, it was a long time ago. I was friendly with the receptionist, and we were just chit chatting. And I told her, I was like, yeah, I can't remember how like the topic of revenge came up, but I was like, oh, you know, the Torah actually like prohibits taking revenge. You're not allowed to take revenge against someone. And she was like outraged. She's like, what? What do you mean you can't take revenge on people? That's ridiculous. Like, it's a completely natural thing to do. And I was like, I don't know what to tell you. Like, you're not allowed to do it. I guess I just want to know, like, what is that in terms of taking revenge? Is there a specific, like, it says, lo tekum lo titor, don't take revenge and don't bear a grudge. So, like, what does that mean? Is it a specific, is it like Maximus level of revenge, or can we just, like, clarify what exactly the Torah is prohibiting there?
Okay, that's a great question. So, revenge is a very nuanced concept within Judaism. At first blush, it would seem that Judaism, which is all about righteousness and judgment and exacting exactly what God would feel is correct in the world, would say that if somebody goes and does something horrible to you, an eye for an eye would say that you do it back to them. And not only is there nothing wrong with that, but that would actually be the tzedek. That would be the righteous way of going about creating a universal moral equilibrium in the world, simply to right a wrong, to rectify evil by putting evil in its place. So that's sort of our gut. Our gut would say that. However, Judaism is much more nuanced when it comes to the concept of revenge, and there's for a lot of reasons that it was built as such. But the truth is that when something happens, the first thought that we have is, where was God? Where was God in this picture? And a concept called bitachon, which means faith or trust, that the Creator is involved in this, and it's not just a visceral vengeance that we're taking out. That's not an honor killing that we're doing, but there's God. So that's one concept that we have to grapple with. There's another concept, and the other concept is that in Judaism, we don't merely have something called rights, but we have something called responsibilities. And it's a dividing line between the Jewish way of looking in the world and the secular way. And responsibility would mean, for example, that let's say I have a plot of land. So my right is that nobody should walk on my land. I have a right, nobody to walk on my land. And then if the world is built with responsibilities, so now I have a responsibility not to walk on your land. So the upshot is the same. Your land won't be trespassed, whether it's because you have a right that no one should walk on your land, or I have a responsibility not to trespass. The difference is, though, that in a world of responsibility, I have to worry about others. Now, when we speak about a vengeance story, while I may feel like I have a right to take vengeance, it's my God-given right to met out judgment, there's also the knowledge that what I do affects the entire world. And when I give a green light to vengeance killings, then the world descends into chaos. Because who hasn't had some sort of wrong perpetrated on them? Who has not been hurt in some way and feel like there has to be a rectification? Everyone has. And therefore, you end up with a society like we see some societies today that descend into essentially the Hatfields and the McCoys, where everyone is fighting everyone else, and one vengeance meets out another vengeance, and the world and the fabric of society unravels. So we take that into the equation when it comes to vengeance, that vengeance can't be done simply by catering to one's indignation. I feel upset, I feel angry, I feel hurt, I feel betrayed. Thus, I have a right to rectify that. But I have to understand that there's also a responsibility for me not to take revenge in a way that it sets a precedent that eventually affects the world in total. So, with all of that introduction, our understanding of vengeance is there are times when vengeance is permitted. But I'll just wrap up this thought that in general, we do things with the letter and not just the spirit of the law. That's actually the dilemma that Israel was faced when they captured Albert Eichmann. And there were many people who wanted to take vengeance. And Israel, with a tremendous amount of cleverness, instead of torturing the man and doing what a lot of the Islamic world would do and drag him through the streets with the rope behind a car, instead Israel said, we're gonna try him in a court of law, and it's going to be in front of the entire world. So there's no question at the end that justice was met out. And when we do that, we scream to the world that there is a God, and there is a way that God wants this world to run.
So first, thank you for that. There's a lot to unpack there, and I wonder, there are a few notes that you spoke about, and I'm sure it'll come about as we go through the discussion. You mentioned that when someone wrongs you, or you're like someone like offends you in some way. Is that different than what happened to Maximus in terms of his family was killed? You mentioned there's someone who wrongs you. What does the Torah have to say about that? And then when there's like a blood debt, effectively someone commits murder against your family, what does the Torah say about that? And you said we can't only focus about the spirit of the law. And it sounded like from the spirit of the law, like we should try not to take revenge. It's not a noble thing. I can definitely see how the world would definitely descend into chaos if people start to turn into vigilante, vengeance seeking. I mean, yeah, that would be a complete disaster on a societal level. So that's the spirit of the law. What does the letter of the law say?
So any wrong that is done to a person, one has to know, so what does the Torah say in terms of what the recourse is? So, for example, an eye for an eye is recourse. It doesn't actually mean we poke out the person's eye, but if somebody knocked out your eye, there would be a litany of payments that would have to be given that equal an eye, and there's different ways that that's done. The first step would be, okay, what does the Torah say our recourse is? And we know that even in American law, one can't just be a vigilante, although they may get off in a court of their peers, in a jury of their peers. That could happen. There was a very famous story many years ago where this fellow was being robbed. I forget his name, on the train, and he happened to have a gun, and he shot all those who were mugging him in the back. Do you remember the guy's name?
I don't remember his name, but I think it was in the 1980s, and I remember when I think he killed like five teenagers, if I remember correctly.
Correct, and he shot them in the back, and so they were even running away, and yet, or at least some of them were, and while the public applauded his actions, and like he was sort of the everyman that wanted to see vengeance against a world that was taking advantage of him. But the letter of the law brought him to trial and said it wasn't okay, and it had to be thought out whether one can do that. And it's not our natural reaction, because there's an animalistic side in us that ever see two cats growling at each other, and that's how we look at each other, and or two people bumping chests in the street. You start. Okay, did you look at me a certain way? And there's sort of like the manly, macho way of taking revenge or putting the person in their place, protecting your turf. Judaism is not into that, and it goes very deeply into the concept of perfecting one's character, perfecting one's midos. We have character, and our job, says the great Vilna Gaon. He said, our entire job in this world is to rectify our character. That's why we were sent down here, to the point that he says that if we don't do that, lama lo chaim, why are you even alive? So rectifying one's character includes anger. Well, a lot of vengeance is anger driven, right? Even if I feel like, wow, I'm doing it for the right reason. There's a verse in the Torah, in the scriptures, that says the following. It's a very, very special verse. It says, Hane'elavim ve'enam olvim, those who are shamed but don't shame back. Hashomim cherpasam, those who hear their embarrassment, ve'enam meshivim, but don't respond. Ve'ohavam ketzeis hashemesh b'vuraso. God loves them like he loves the sun shining in its peak brightness in midday. I want to take revenge. I want to besmirch their name on social media. I want them to regret, to rue the day their lips ever mention my name in a derogatory fashion. I want that, and it's wholly unsatisfying, like many things are unsatisfying. But Judaism is not to satisfy the instantaneous desire, but it's to create a world where God's will is reflected in everything that we do. And sometimes that means to hold back. So I would say, ask a rabbi. If you don't know, don't ask ChatGPT. Ask a rabbi and find out what your recourse is. There's the letter of the law of don't take revenge, but the Torah is speaking about this concept of bitachon, which means that the moment I take revenge is the moment I say that God played no role in this. And whatever lesson I was supposed to learn, I'm not going to. In the example that the rabbis give us, which is just one of my favorite examples, is like a person who takes a stick and hits a dog, and the dog turns around and bites the stick, says, "You stick, you hurt me." And of course, it wasn't the stick, but it was the person holding the stick. Often, and this is a very Jewish way of looking at the world, when something happens to us, the person who was the messenger to perpetrate that wrongdoing was literally a stick. And if it wouldn't have been them, it would have been someone else. So again, I'm not discounting the human desire to take revenge on the actual person, because it does look like that person was the one who hurt me. But the Torah is saying, slow down, one moment. There was a lesson, and God wanted you to understand something. And there's growth that can be had, and there's trust in the Creator that everything that happens is not just for the good, but everything that happens is for a lesson that I'm supposed to learn, and it comes from God. So that's number one. We take a moment and we say, that person is nothing but a stick, and I have to understand that it's the Creator who is holding the stick, and there's a lesson that I need to learn. Maximus is a very unique example, because it would seem like, okay, I get it. Someone insulted me, he's a stick, or someone even caused me to get fired, they're a stick. But somebody killed my wife and child, that's more than a stick. So there are, like I said, there is a recourse, and it could be, for example, if there's no way to bring this to court, and there's no way to warn the person and not to do it. And that there is a concept called Gol Adam, and you can take vengeance on them, and that is permitted. Again, there's more. It's not within the capacity of this podcast to go through all the details, but suffice it to say that there is there are cases under certain circumstances that gladiators could fit into, where a person can take that kind of revenge.
So that's kind of interesting. So you're saying there's a certain level of like, the verse is saying don't take revenge and don't bear a grudge. And that seems like more if someone, I guess, wrongs you or like, strikes you or does some kind of, it sounds like kind of minor damage. But in the case of Maximus, where someone kills their family, then in such a case, is there some kind of like overriding verse, or it's dealing with a separate situation? And if so, like, I mean, I know this is like perhaps a tricky question, but like, why does the Torah distinguish between those two cases? At the end of the day, you're taking revenge. Why the shift?
So it is a separate situation. It's when I said lo sikum lo sitar, don't take revenge, don't bear a grudge. That's not only minor things; those can be very major things. The idea of the Gol Adam is specifically killing. So there could be a lot of major things that you would want to take revenge about, and that's not the recourse. The recourse is other things, which do involve going and you can get the person excommunicated. There is a recourse. Often it may not be as satisfying.
Sorry, when you say in the case of Gol Adam is dealing with killing, as in when you can kill someone, or someone, like, is the distinguishing factor with Maximus the fact that Commodus killed Maximus's family, and therefore the Maximus is allowed to kill him? Like, I just want to clarify, like what's Correct. The trigger that allows a person to kill somebody else?
Correct. It's a relative. It is a killing of a relative in a way where the person clearly did it, and they will get away scot-free because the court, for different reasons, don't have jurisdiction to give him that punishment. And there are two components over here. One component is that a person, we don't simply allow a murderer to go around murdering. So there's a certain amount of din or justice that the Almighty allows when it comes to murder. Right? That's point number one. And point number two, the Torah does, in certain circumstances, allow for human nature to manifest itself in very impossible situations. And we have a precedent to this with a concept called Isha Shvuya. A lady was taken captive, where a person may marry a lady who was captured in war, and the rabbis teach us that in this case, Hashem is speaking to the human nature of a person. So it would be a double trigger, allowing somebody who really does deserve to be killed, but because of the circumstances, justice can't be met out. So and this is split up into part A and B, in the spirit of justice and in the spirit of not allowing a murderer to run free. And so that would be that. And in addition, speaking to the human nature of specifically a Goel Hadam, which means a relative. So a relative feels the pain more acutely. And if there's a clear murderer and the murderer is going to get away scot-free, and the relative feels this acute pain, then under certain circumstances, you can go after them. So The Torah does not nullify human nature.
I mean, that's fascinating. I almost want to double click on that. Could we elaborate on that in terms of, because on the one hand, what you're saying now makes a lot of sense in terms of it was a killing, this guy's going to get away with it. I mean, first, why can't you say, who says he's going to get away with it? Maybe the court can't deal with him, but God's going to take care of him, presumably. Why do we give the surviving relative agency to go after this person and kill him, killing the murderer, and not say just trust in God?
Right. That's actually why we needed both reasons that I gave, because if it wouldn't be a relative, just the fact that justice should permeate the world. We know, we don't just assume we know, God's ways are righteous and all of his paths are just, and he will get what's due to him. There's a Mishnah in Pirkei Avot where Hillel sees a skull that's floating down the river, and he looks at it and he says, whoever this happened to you because you did this to someone, and whoever did this to you will have this happen to them. And it's a statement in Pirkei Avot where Hillel is saying there is justice in the world. So for the average person who sees this kind of injustice, and there's no legal recourse in a court of law for the average person, yes, we say that. However, when it comes to a relative, when it comes to human nature, combine the travesty of murder with the human nature to stick up for one's family, not just to stick up. There's also the concept that that the rest of the family lives feeling in danger as well, and there's a famous mafia line where the mafia will come in and shoot a husband and a wife, and then they'll see this little 9-year-old kid standing in the corner, and they didn't realize he was a witness, and then they turn and aim the gun at him, and they say, look, we don't want to kill a kid, but he witnessed this, and he's going to grow up and he'll want to take vengeance. So the murderer may feel that same way, like, wow, I killed this person's relative. This family is going to come after me. I better preempt that. And what that does is that puts the family squarely in the line of fire. So the family could say it's not just a visceral feeling of vengeance, but it's also, we feel that there could be a target on our back as well. So there are a combination of reasons that the commentaries say that allow the family specifically to protect themselves.
Wow, that's fascinating. I know we spoke about this to some degree, but I do want to discuss that. I think there's a concept in the Torah that like God says, vengeance is mine. Vengeance belongs to me. So I want to see in terms of, we see a case where clearly it says lo tikom, right? Don't take revenge. And then we see the Gol Adam is allowed to take revenge for a variety of factors, as you mentioned. What's the meaning of that verse when God says, vengeance is mine? And again, it's kind of, it seems like we've explored it, but I just want to discuss, there seems to be an explicit verse that says, this belongs to me.
Yeah, that would all tie into the concept of bitachon, faith, meaning God saying, I know you want to rectify this wrong. There's no way that you're going to rectify it in a just way.
Sorry, is that because, I guess, why is that? Like, why can't we? I mean, we put, I guess, vengeance kind of in the court of law. Sorry, go on.
Right. So when there is a prescribed method, it becomes not vengeance, but it becomes justice. And really, when God says vengeance is mine, it's not that God is going to take revenge. I mean, everything belongs to God. Everything is part of God. It is God saying, I will make sure that justice reigns supreme. And I got your back. And if you want to feel like you are avenged, you could feel it by knowing that I will take care of things. But God is saying, if you try, let's say somebody besmirches you on social media. So think of like the typical way of taking vengeance. I'll besmirch them on social media. Well, let's say you have a bigger following than them, or it got further. So the measure of justice is no longer fair, and that kind of nuanced inequality of justice is inevitable in nearly every circumstance. Even when a court of law does what it needs to do, it's not really vengeance. It's really justice that God is prescribing. This is how to rectify a wrong. So I think that expression is God saying, I got your back.
I actually think so. I'm actually really excited now. I think we just tapped into an awesome idea. And because I saw a lot of, as I was kind of researching this topic, a question that kept coming up is like, is this just Maximus's personal quest for vengeance? Is it justice? So there seems to be like almost this weighing question of like, when is vengeance justice? When is going through a court of law or doing the just thing, taking an act of vengeance? So I guess I want to like what does vengeance mean in Judaism? Like, it almost sounds, I think I have an idea of where we're going with this, but I would like to hear it clarified from you because you know a lot more than I do. But I want to discuss in terms of, we're saying vengeance is mine. Why? Because if you try to take vengeance, it could be unequal, and that would not be just. That's not fair. So what does vengeance mean? When God says vengeance is mine, I'm assuming God doesn't mean he's this kind of angry, vengeful, vindictive, person, which is how we would understand it. So when God says vengeance is mine, he must mean something that's just. I mean, he can't be saying, you punched me once, I'm going to batter you to a pulp. So what does vengeance mean in Jewish thinking that is encapsulated in this quote by God, vengeance is mine? Let's explore that.
That's a great question. It's a wonderfully nuanced concept. I may get into the weeds here, but I'll try not to. There is
please get into the weeds. Let's hear it. Yeah, do it.
Okay. There's a concept in the world called truth. Truth is an absolute. Things are or they're not. We may view it as relative, but in the divine eye, a truth exists. And when something is not true, it's false. And 99% true is still false. Okay. So the concept is true and false. Either it is accurate in reality, in ultimate reality, or not. There's another concept called good and bad. And good and bad are not the same as true and false necessarily. So good and bad means perhaps the result of what I'm doing. It looks good. It feels good. There's going to be a good outcome. Bad means I see calamity. I see how this is going to be hurtful. And very often we associate good and truth and bad and false. But there are many examples where it doesn't have to be that way. So, for example, if my boss tells me, don't come late to work again or you're fired. And the next day I try my best and I came late anyways. And for all days, he happened to come late as well. So he didn't see me coming late. He comes over to my desk after he came late and says, hey, were you here on time today? I'm thinking, that's not fair. You didn't even see. But now I'm stuck with a dilemma. I could say truth. No, I was not here on time, but that's going to be bad because I'll lose my job. Or I could say I was here on time, which is a lie, but then that's going to be good because I keep my job. So all of a sudden you have an example of how true and bad would be the same in my eyes, and false and good are the same. So two criteria that seem very similar, but they're not actually. However, in the divine world, and this is something that we strive for, if I can create a goodness, or if I can focus on goodness so clearly, it becomes so lucid that what I view as good also aligns to what was absolute truth, then I've lived an amazing life. And to recognize that good and true are not mutually inclusive, not mutually exclusive, but when good is what it's supposed to be, it is synonymous with true. And that's actually the great struggle that we have in our lives, is to view good and align it with true. That's a very deep idea. And all the mistakes that we make in our lives are when we view things as good when they're actually false. And we try to justify them as, yes, but. So basically, we're taking two criteria and we're saying if they are optimal, they're aligned. They're synonymous. Justice and vengeance, when it's optimal, is actually aligned. They're not two separate things. We look at vengeance as a visceral reaction, as a knee-jerk desire to pay back. But really, the real concept of vengeance is simply creating a world that comes in balance again. And when I say the word vengeance, and I'm speaking about us taking vengeance, I'm speaking about a skewed idea which can't possibly be aligned with justice. My vengeance will either be out of proportion, will be misplaced, and it may feel satisfying, but it won't align with God's value of tzedek, of actual justice. However, when justice is correct, when it is exactly aligned, then it appears as vengeance, and there's nothing wrong with that. Because there's nothing inherently wrong with vengeance as long as it's not catering to one's base desire to pay back. Vengeance is a good thing because it teaches us that the Creator runs the world in a just manner. And when we see bad happening to the wicked, it reassures us that that there's a Creator, and the world does not run haphazardly. So the word vengeance to you and I are not at all the same as the word God taking vengeance, which aligns literally to justice. It's synonymous when it's done properly.
That is, I actually, that's a phenomenal, like, Marshall, if I can say so, because I mean, that's actually, I don't think that is where I was going, but I think to summarize what you're saying is like, vengeance is effectively bringing like the world back into balance. Like someone did, 20 points of evil, God effectively meets that out and counterbalances the 20 points of evil. That's incredible. And like, that would be just, obviously that's the whole point of justice is that, wow, I love it. That's incredible. If I can, and truth is, it was fun because I was debating whether or not to say it. I was like, I don't see how this would necessarily connect to the topic at hand, exploring more of like Maximus killing Commodus, but now it is directly relevant because what kind of bothers me about Gladiator is, look, we want Commodus dead, right? He 100% deserves it. He's evil. He's a terrible emperor. He murdered his own father for the throne. I can't help but wonder, especially, when I watched this as a teenager, it was awesome. But watching it now, I just can't help but think, Maximus, you just killed the emperor and he doesn't have an heir. And it's very nice that you're saying that, the Senate should take control, but I mean, let's get realistic here. Like, what's going to happen? Like, people aren't going to be like, oh yeah, let's like abdicate power. The person who's next in line, or the general of the armies, whoever has power, is going to now create, like, there's a good likelihood of there being a civil war. Or, Maximus has to kill the Praetorians who were ordered to execute him, presumably lawfully. They were told by their emperor to kill him. So Maximus is killing the Praetorians. Maximus is killing a bunch of people in the Gladiator fights. Maximus is killing a whole lot of people until he gets to Commodus. It's literally just like a bloodbath until he's able to get to Commodus. And then, of course, he kills Commodus, and we don't see what happens later. I mean, I guess now we do with the sequel, which I will definitely ignore, and I didn't see it anyway. But I wonder if this is kind of like what's being addressed here in terms of Maximus avenged himself. He killed Commodus, but there's collateral damage. And is that just? Is it fair for other people to suffer so that Maximus can get his revenge, even though that's what he needs to do in order to get his revenge? Anyway, there's just some thoughts that I was thinking about, just like how complicated this can get when you get into the weeds.
Well, listen, your thoughts are really, really correct, and they. Again, going into the weeds, but I'm not going to go in there, but I'll just give you a little food for thought. Maximus in this movie is not immortal. He is akin to a superhero. His fighting is superhero-like, and although he dies in the end, but he is the proverbial superhero. And superheroes in mythology are above humans. like in a world of superheroes, which in mythology, Greek and Roman mythology, superheroes are the equivalent to gods. So Kal-El, right? That's it's essentially a god. And in a world of polytheism, where there are a lot of gods, the the value of humans is downgraded. It's one of the reasons why ethical monotheism is called ethical monotheism, because if there's one God, then human beings become the raison d'être. They become the reason for our existence. They become the crown jewel of creation. But in a world of many gods who do everything that mortals do, they kill, they steal, they commit adultery. The only difference between them and us is they have superpowers and we don't have superpowers. So in a world of gods, we human beings are sophisticated weasels. We're background. And in a world of gods, human beings can be collateral damage, and that's perfectly acceptable. When gods fight, human beings are their collateral damage. And in a world of gods, human collateral damage is very acceptable. Maximus, in this scenario, is less human and more godlike. The way he fights, his determination, the inevitability of his success, until, of course, the end. He's a Roman god. They would build statues to him. There would be mythology about Maximus in the future. So in a world of gods, Praetorian guards are collateral damage. They're sophisticated weasels whose death doesn't bother us. Yes, they have families. They have children. Yes, the entire nation may descend into chaos and civil war, but it's acceptable because it's a world of gods. And in a world of gods, human casualty is acceptable and inevitable and nothing to grieve.
Wow, that is an interesting observation. Yeah, I got to think about that one. I did want to see if we had time to explore one other theme.
Yeah.
So I want to discuss, in terms of, we speak about kind of vengeance and, meting out justice. I want to discuss the story of Dina, if we can, in terms of, we see that, Dina was taken by another man against her will, and her brothers, Shimon and Levi, went and exacted justice against them. So in terms of and I know the Torah actually has a kind of very interesting mixed reaction. Yaakov's not so happy about it. It happened. Like, they almost get the last word. And I want to explore, how do we view that level of, and I guess just to summarize for our crowd, so Jacob was the third of the three forefathers. He had 12 sons. He had one daughter. That one daughter, his name is Dina. And when she was, like, I guess, out touring, she must have been a teenager. Someone from, like, a neighboring town saw her, liked her, and then raped her, and then took her captive. And to avenge themselves, her brothers, Shimon and Levi, went and massacred the entire town. So how do we deal with that? I mean, that sounds like taking vengeance to the absolute max. So how do we address that?
Yeah, just to clarify, she wasn't captive at that point. Otherwise, they would have been going in to rescue her.
Oh, interesting. Oh, good point. Okay.
Yeah. So, but that idea of them honor killing this family, which essentially it sounds like in the Torah, that's what it was, is not looked upon favorably. Later on, when Yaakov was on his deathbed, he condemns it. Kiva apam hargu ish, through their anger they killed a man, and it was not viewed favorably. However, it's not a total condemnation, and we see that it's not a total condemnation because Levi, who was one of the two brothers, ended up channeling that vengeful nature to take vengeance for God, for those who worship the golden calf. And he was elevated, and the entire tribe of Levi was elevated to become a priestly tribe. So apparently there's a very beautiful and nuanced concept that the Torah is teaching us, which is that any vengeance that is taken, and there are many other examples in the Torah of this, when there is a vengeance, there are rules behind it. And those rules, part of them would involve taking revenge, as it were, for God or for God's honor, not for our own honor. Now, again, that sounds very radical, and you have to know exactly how that manifests itself. But the concept of not catering to our basest instinct or desire to take revenge, but rather anything that's done is done because the Torah sanctions it and says this is part of justice and this is allowed. We do, but we don't do it otherwise. And the proper thing would have been for them to sit down with their father and say, Dad, we're really, really upset. We feel that it's a desecration of God's name that we allow this to happen. What should be the next step? And the brothers, who were Talmudic scholars of note, of course, they knew the Talmud wasn't written then, but the Torah itself, the oral law, was well known to them. They would have been able to sit down and figured out exactly how justice should be meted out. It was really the fact that they did it with in a way that not only seemed vengeful, but to the rest of the world looked like they were doing it in a tricky way. It seemed incredibly premeditated. And Yaakov said, this is not the way that we act. And it's not good for God, not good for our tribe, not good for our reputation. It's just not good. Now, there are times, and just to get back, maybe we'll wrap up with the Gladiator concept. There are times when somebody like a Commodus exists, and their wickedness is such that we know that they will continue to murder innocents, and we then go and we met out justice, which could look like revenge. Nobody, for example, would blame anyone if they went and killed Hitler. I wish they would have. They tried many times because a murderer that's out there is a murderer. And there's a beautiful verse that we're going to be saying this evening. It's Friday that we're speaking, so we're going to say this verse tonight. Ohave Hashem sinura. Those who love God hate evil. It's part of the package. So when we see evil, and especially evil that is going to continue the wickedness of murder, we can met out justice, and we have to figure out how it should be done. But that for sure exists, and we don't say a guy like that should get away scot-free. And more than that, it could even be that in that case, your earlier question about civil war wouldn't be applicable, because a murderer can't be allowed to live, and we let the cards fall as they may, especially that we don't know what is going to happen next. But in Judaism, we have a concept called Bori V'Shema Bori Adif. When something is certain and something is questionable, the certitude comes first. And there's a certitude that this person is a murderer and will continue to murder. And what's going to happen next, we don't know. So we have to take care of the issue. Otherwise, we can never murder a Saddam Hussein or a Yahya Sinwar or a Hitler, because we say, yeah, but what'll happen? Who's going to come next? We don't say that. We say there's a bari, there's something that we know for certain. But what troubles you, and what was a catalyst for this conversation, was that seemed to be less of his motivation, and it seemed to be much more personal. And when it comes to personal vengeance, while we sympathize, we empathize with it, but we also say the world can't descend into a tit for tat, because the world will unravel, and that's not how justice is met out.
Okay, fantastic, Rabbi. This is a great way of wrapping it up, and thank you for taking the time and joining us.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for tuning in to the Dilemmas on Screen, a Jewish Perspective podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe. If you have any suggestions for a moral dilemma you'd like analyzed, feel free to send it over. Thanks again, and see you next time.